of me, wash your hands. And then she was like, wait a second, I didn't need to go in front of you. We're all just washing our hands. And I was like, oh, that's not true, ma'am. I didn't say that, obviously. I was like, oh, no, it's fine. But what I wanted to say was like, some of us are washing underwear. So I didn't want you to have to stand and wait while I washed my underwear.
Some of us are doing laundry.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. Oh my goodness. You know, we've done so well for like 2 years. I don't know, 1.5 years, however long we started this. But I guess it's a hilarious intro. I know you guys are probably laughing in your cars right now like you do every time we say the intro.
Just a little case of the giggles. My goodness. Man. But oh well.
Well,
we've got an exciting day for you today.
Yeah, so we're going to be traveling today from Pyramid Creek to Nickel Creek. And that was a day where Molly had done some very meticulous math and announced to us that we were going to be traveling 16 miles. Now, the night before, she did some different math and announced to us that we were actually going to be traveling
17.4 miles. And I really felt like that was kind of the top end of my estimate, but I did feel bad because it was adding an extra 1.5 miles, and we were going to have our resupply at Longmire this day. So I knew it was going to take us some time to get all of the fun stuff out of our buckets and repack our packs.
Let's just cut to the chase. What was the actual mileage for the day?
So the actual mileage ended up being 18.5 miles.
There we go.
So, and we didn't know how long the day was going to be until the day was over. That's when we finally knew how long it was. But yeah, I had calculated 17.5 the night before. And then there was also a trail reroute due to a trail washout by Stevens Creek. So there were all these variables. We had Kautz Creek that we were going to cross like first thing in the morning. We were going to have our Longmire resupply, and then we were also going to have that reroute that we were going to have to deal with. So Carrie and I, if you've listened to our podcast about our time on the Copper Ridge Loop, we are a little bit scarred by not creek crossings in themselves, but trail finding when it comes to having to track down pink ribbons in particular, as well as just like finding our way when the river has just chosen many different courses over years and you have to find where the trail goes. So we knew that we might have some difficulty up ahead because of the creek crossing coming up. And so we tried to be doing our best to get an early start. So the night before, we had decided as a group that we'd try to get up at 6 because we just knew that's when we needed to get up to try to get somewhat of an early start, which is probably a late start for most people, but we did what we could.
Now, when I woke up in the morning, it was beautiful out, serene, you might even say. And I want you to think of it as like a beautiful, idyllic view. Like the music is like the do 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 do. Okay, I unzip the tent, and what do I see right away? Oh, look, behold, little mice turds are sitting upon my pack today.
No.
Uh-huh. I think, okay, maybe they just came, they saw, they took a dump, they left. No, they chewed also through the Dyneema, which is a very strong type of fabric, back of my pack because I had yet again missed a single Ziploc baggie with the crumb of a bar that I had eaten the day before. And
the homemade granola bar once again.
And the mice, they cannot resist that bar. It is like the best bar they've ever heard of in their little mouse lives. And it did not get to eat any of the bar. And thankfully it did not enter my pack, nor did it poop a million times in there because it was able to just pull, I guess, a little bit of the bag out, see it wasn't what it wanted, and went on its way. Now, Molly had a confession to make after I found this thing.
So we had mentioned to you last week that when we were about to go to bed, we did see one mouse scurry through the campsite. So that was kind of an omen of, oh no. And during the night, I kept hearing these weird sounds, like a ding kind of a sound. Like, I didn't know what it was, and I still don't understand. It must have been the mouse, but I heard these weird, like, scurries and, like, weird other sounds, and I don't know if it was the sound that the mouse was making as it was, like, chewing through the Dyneema of Carrie's pack or what, but I did say, oh, Carrie, I thought I heard something weird out there last night.
Yes. So I'm never putting Molly on like bear patrol or mouse patrol because she'd just be like, I guess I'll just listen to the bear eat all of her food.
No, we know what happens. For bear patrol, I would be asleep. And for mouse patrol, I would just lay there and do nothing.
You would be essentially asleep on duty. So that was kind of disappointing. And I feel like I started to really fear mice because I was like, oh my goodness, they are just going to never leave me alone. I've made this amazing bar and now they can't stop eating my stuff.
And we've brought probably like 20 more of these bars. So what are the odds that we'll be able to always put the bag into our Ursack and not have it left in the pack?
Other than that, this was a pretty decent campsite. The one thing that I don't think we talked about last week was we were all just kind of hanging out in our campsite and no one was there. And then we definitely heard the toilet seat, like the toilet lid slam shut. So I don't know if somebody had just popped off trail, used the toilet and then left because we never had another person there, or was it left open this whole time, or was,
maybe a mouse did it.
I was going to say the mice were like, oh, there's no packs ready and available for me to poop on. So I guess I have to use this ridiculous toilet.
And it was like a tad creepy. It was deep forest, and I don't need to have other people, like other groups camping near me, but it was almost strange when we had gone through Devil's Dream earlier in the day. And it was just literally every campsite was full to then go to Pyramid Creek, and we were the only ones. So that was interesting. But yeah, so when we got up at 6 a.m., the first thing really that happened is Carrie was devastated to see that, the previous occurrence of a mouse chewing into her pack on the very first night was like not anomaly or an isolated incident, but it was going to happen repeatedly. So that was really discouraging. And then the other thing I'm thinking about is it was just still dark when we got up and the sun hadn't come up yet. So it was kind of nice. You could still see some stars and it was like pretty quiet, and we had to use our headlamp. So we kind of moved together as a group in the dark.
Yep. But we got up and we were ready to leave at 8:30. Give us a round of applause. I'll wait. Thank you. That was very nice. So we left at 8:30 because we wanted to have a simpler crossing of the, what are we calling it? The Kautz Creek. It's Kautz. So someone can correct us if we're saying it wrong. But we did Google it. So, hopefully we're saying it right. Anyway, if you recall, when we talk about river crossings, when you're on a mountain with glaciers, it's easier to cross the rivers or creeks oftentimes in the morning because the flow of the river is higher in the afternoon just because of all that sun and heat on the glaciers makes them melt, and then they send more water downstream. And this creek I wasn't really anticipating to be too difficult. Basically, in my mind, they put bridges over all of the creeks on the Wonderland Trail pretty much except for this one. So I kind of figure that they think that people can cross it safely. We got there pretty quickly. I feel like it was not very far from camp. I don't think we even walked for maybe 20 minutes or so, but it felt like we put on our shoes, put on our packs, walked to the creek, and then Molly and I decided we wanted to just switch into our camp shoes. So we put on our sandals and then crossed the creek and then put back on our shoes, which just kind of felt kind of like, why did we even put our shoes on in the first place? And it was really a pretty straightforward creek crossing, especially in September. Usually the rivers and creeks aren't running as high as they would be in June. We were able to find a great crossing point right away. We just did our usual creek crossing facing upstream, stepping across sideways and, using your trekking poles for balance, having our chest and hip belt unclipped.
And this is an interesting crossing because the ranger who had chatted with us told us to keep our phones with like a navigation app open just because like when you're crossing the creek, obviously you're getting your feet wet maybe like once or twice, but you're actually going about a quarter of a mile through the entire kind of like creek bed system. So the creek has ran in different areas and kind of carved out new paths for itself, but it's not an area with a really consistent path. So she wanted us to know that since we were going counterclockwise, we would be trending like downstream a little bit. I don't know. I think she said like to the right. But she had mentioned that some people had crossed the creek and then tried to just go straight up the bank and ended up like scrambling up these kind of steep like dirt cliffs. But instead we like kind of just kept it kept trending, and then did find the beautiful pink ribbons and didn't really have any trouble following the trail. But once again, after our experience at Graybeal on the Copper Ridge Loop and spending several hours trying to figure out exactly where we needed to be, it felt very good to just be able to kind of follow the path. And then before we knew it, we were actually able to get a little bit more of a water refill because Pyramid Creek did not have a water source that was near it.
Yeah, go figure. Pyramid Creek, no creek.
Actually, though, there's like a creek before it, but it's you'd have to go at least a 1/10 of a mile, if not more, back the other way on the trail. So yeah, we filled our water and then changed out of our camp shoes, and Rachel had decided to just go for it in her ultras, so she didn't have to do that, but we all just helped each other filter, and we were getting ready to try to hit, I think, another 3 miles of trail to make it to Longmire, which we were going to get to do downhill miles, and we knew we were on a little bit of a timetable today because it's fall and the sun was going to be going down by 7 p.m.
So it was all downhill to Longmire. We did have to cross the road that goes around Mount Rainier 1 or 2 times, I think. And it always feels so weird to kind of be returning to civilization after you spend a couple nights outside, having to be like, oh, got to look both ways for cars and then sprint across the road. And so we just kind of continued down into Longmire.
And it was kind of a fun full circle moment because every time I've driven up to Paradise on Mount Rainier, we've always seen this trailhead sign or trail junction. And one time we were going slow enough that we could read that the sign said Wonderland Trail. And I remember in May specifically, we didn't know if we'd be able to be on the Wonderland Trail. We didn't know if the weather and everything would work out. But I remember seeing that and being wow, it would be so fun to be a hiker and walking across this road versus being a driver on the way up to the mountain. So it was a fun kind of full circle moment to be now I'm here doing the thing that I've really dreamed about doing for years, really. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that when we were going downhill, it was a decent grade where it was a continuous downhill. And by the time we were close to Longmire, I actually felt like I could go uphill for a little ways after all the down.
When we got to Longmire, I went in and picked up the resupply from the ranger station. And then it was just kind of a very much hiker trash moment where we're all sitting on the porch of the ranger station, throwing away all of our trash from the previous day's meals and also getting all of our food for the upcoming day's meals. We were so excited to find a can of Pringles. We really enjoyed those and actually just ate the whole can on the porch. And one thing that was kind of something that I would keep in mind, I know that some people don't like to repackage their oatmeals, but if you're going on the Wonderland Trail and your food is not in a bag that's absolutely 100% waterproof, I would recommend repackaging items that are in kind of more of a papery container, like how oatmeal packets are. I don't know, there's something with that. It feels like when water touches them, they melt, so to speak. Just because our friends' oatmeals were not repackaged, and so she kind of was having issues where it was kind of, starting to get really soggy on the outside, and then her oatmeal gets kind of weird before you even get to it. So we threw away all of our trash, and it did not take very long to do our resupply. Just because, we didn't have a ton of food. We were only going to carry 2 days worth at that point, which was awesome. I think we had thrown in some extra pudding cups, so we had a little snack of those, and
ate a lot of Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, we ate Pop-Tarts because we kind of haven't eaten all the Pop-Tarts we'd brought already, and we were adding more. So it was kind of actually a very fun experience where it was hey, Rachel, do you want some of my Pop-Tarts? Oh, okay. Well, do you want some of my this and that? And so it was also fun because we'd been at Longmire just a couple days before where those girls had finished, and here we were actually on the trail. And so then the next order of business, of course, is to go and use a real toilet with a functioning sink and with soap. So we were all excited to go and do that.
We got to wait in line, actually, because I think a bus of some tourists had just shown up. So I remember we had to wait in line, and then Carrie and I hadn't had the chance to wash our underwear yet that day because we hadn't crossed like any real streams except for the glacial flow. So I was like had a moment of embarrassment because I wanted to wash my stuff in the sink, but then there were like all these just like nice civilians there, not dirtbag hikers, and so I remember I had to like just like stand and wait until like I had an opening where I could quickly wash in the sink.
I just liked it because there was a lady that was behind me in line, and I said, "Oh, you can go in front of me," and she was like, "I don't need to go in." Well, she went in front of me, washed her hands, and then she was like, "Wait a second, I didn't need to go in front of you. We're all just washing our hands." And I was like, "Oh, that's not true, ma'am." I didn't say that, obviously. I was like, "Oh no, it's fine." But what I wanted to say was like, some of us are washing underwear, so I didn't want you to have to stand and wait while I washed my underwear.
Some of us are doing laundry.
Yeah, it's laundry day for us. So after that, we kind of regrouped outside the ladies' restroom, and we said, okay, let's get back on trail. Was this also a point where someone was like, is this a girls' trip? I don't think so. Maybe not yet, but we started getting that comment later on this trip. So we got back on the trail, and then, of course, it was an uphill climb. We were going past some waterfalls that are apparently kind of popular. I don't really remember their names, but it was kind of funny because you could only a little bit see them from the path. You know, it was kind of your view was restricted by branches and leaves. And I remember we were going uphill and we have a good pace, and this couple stopped a different couple in front of us, and they were saying like, well, where are the waterfalls? We haven't seen them, and trying to figure out what waterfalls they've seen. And I was like, I'm just going to keep on going because I cannot tell you the names of probably any waterfalls around this whole thing because I'm just, passing through. I'm not here to see a specific waterfall.
This next section of the hike that Carrie's describing was really timely for us because I think we were able to go about 8 miles with a really nice grade and an amazing trail. So you could tell that this is a fairly high use area for people who are just like wanting to hike in the forests of Mount Rainier. It was a pretty wide path, and the majority of it was we went for several miles with probably only like 200 feet per mile of elevation. So we could just get a really nice pace and just like start just grinding out the miles. And there were like a couple sections where it would be pretty steep. And so we'd have a steep uphill and then it would even out again. And it was just, I would just describe it as just a really nice, lush forest, basically kind of what you would imagine for, the lush areas of Washington. But we really, oh man, we churned out the miles. And
there was one thing that I meant to mention earlier, but kind of right after you leave Longmire, you cross the Nisqually River, and there was this cool, massive bridge that went across it. It was really close to the parking lot. I'm not sure if it was a parking lot for Longmire or for a different spot, but I would say if you were even going there for just a day trip, I would go on like by that bridge or on that bridge because you get this amazing view of Mount Rainier from the bridge. And so I just wanted to put that in there and I forgot to say it, but you can go ahead and.
No, and that was a beautiful view from the footlog bridge across the river, and it's like this beautiful white glacial color, and then you have a really nice clear view of Mount Rainier from there. So we were just really soaking it all in. We wanted to have our lunch at Reflection Lakes, which is it was well over halfway. I think it was like 13 miles into our day. And it was an area that we drove past when we were dropping off resupplies, and we were just really admiring like the beautiful view of the mountain and the fact that you can catch a reflection of Mount Rainier in it. So we were hoping to get there for lunch, and we were still, I want to say, maybe 2.5 miles away when we decided, you know what, I think we just need to take like a sitting rest because we've walked 8 miles, today already, and we haven't had our lunch, and it'd just be nice to sit down. So there was a nice area where a bridge crossed just a nice freshwater creek that we could filter from. And this is where Carrie captured a video of me.
Yeah, it's just so funny because I feel like sometimes when you sit, you're in a beautiful area, but you're just sitting there like staring into space. And I kind of was cracking up because both Molly and Rachel were just sitting there staring, and I probably was doing it too, but I can't see myself, So I took a good video of Molly doing that. And then it was so funny because when we stood up to leave, I bent over to grab my trekking poles from the ground. They tipped over from the rock that I propped them on, and I was like, and I just was cracking up so much. So then my friend Rachel and I made a second video picking our poles up from the ground, making our noises, being kind of like, you've been hiking for 3 days, when you start making these noises. And then it was just a little bit more steep uphill. And it's funny because there weren't a lot of tourists, it starts getting pretty steep, and then you start seeing a lot again. And so you're like, okay, we're about to come to some sort of an attraction. And there was this little spot where you could go 0.1 extra mile to see Narada Falls. And 0.1 mile, if you're only going 1 mile, feels like nothing. But we had to kind of debate for a second. And then I said, you know what? It's just 0.2 miles overall because you have to go there and back. So we went ahead and went up a little bit to see Narada Falls. It was pretty. And I think the most funny part about it to me was like everyone there was dressed so beautifully because these are for like their Instagram or whatever's hot these days. I guess Twitter. No, I don't know. Whatever the young people are on.
TikTok.
Oh, yeah. TikTok. Anyway, these people are all like dressed.
They were getting ready for their Twitter photo shoot.
These people were like all dressed up and ready to go. And nothing wrong with that. But I always just feel like they must look at us and be like, well, what are these people doing in their old smelly clothes? So we took in the waterfall. It was pretty. And you know what? What are you going to say? It wasn't worth the 0.2 miles because then we got to do 0.1 of the miles was downhill, which felt actually very nice. And then we just rejoined up with the path. And as we kept going uphill, we did see a decent amount of tourists. And so that kind of led to some opportunities for some awkward moments because we were, visiting with our friend quite a bit. And I just remember there was this family of tourists walking towards us. And as we're walking the other way, I was asking my friend, what's your dad's name? Because I couldn't remember what her dad's name was, but I wasn't looking back at her, obviously. You just walk and you look forward when you talk. And I remember I was like, hey, what's your dad's name? And there was this like family that were kind of looking at me like, why do you need to know my dad's name? And I wanted to be like, not you guys. I'm talking to my friend. And then my other thing that I just thought was so funny was Rachel was telling us a story about a friend who one time kind of got caught in a snowstorm and she had to sleep on the floor of like a bathroom and like a vault toilet. And I said something like, oh, I would totally be thrilled to sleep on a vault toilet floor or something like that, in the context of if there was a snowstorm. And of course I chose to say that like right as a family from Europe came around the corner. And all I could think was like, oh my goodness, they're going to go back to Europe and just be telling their friends like, man, those Americans, they just love to sleep on the floors of toilets. It's very weird.
I think Carrie's exact quote was, I'd love to sleep in a bathroom stall, like right as they rounded the corner. And then we saw them later and they were probably like, wow, those are those bathroom dwellers. So then when we made it to Reflection Lakes, it was just really exciting because once again, we're in the midst of a pretty long, actually our longest day on the Wonderland Trail. And so we were going to find a spot that we could just sit to like eat our lunch, our trail pizza, and still see, a decent view of the mountain, ideally reflected in the lake. And so it's one of those things where we were kind of continuously searching for like the best spot. There were like a few areas with benches, but we passed them up, and pretty soon we got to this one area that was nice. So we took some pictures with the reflection, and then the lake actually started to get some wind on it. So the reflection went away and we realized we were almost to the end of Reflection Lakes and we still hadn't picked out a lunch spot. So we actually ended up on a sidewalk, and there are these rocks along the sidewalk so that people don't wander down into the grasses and whatnot. And so we actually sat on the rocks, and we were about maybe 4 feet away from the road where cars were going by, and all kinds of, sightseers were walking on the sidewalk past us. So it was pretty hilarious because here we're, at this beautiful view. And we've walked, I don't even know, 40 miles to get there, but we're taking our lunch break with everybody else in the world, and the cars are just driving past.
It was kind of fun because as we were sitting on those rocks, with our trail pizzas out, this older lady walked by and she was like, excuse me, I just have to ask you, are you ladies on a girls trip? And we were like, yeah, I guess we are. And she said, I'm also on a girls trip. My friends and I have been going on girls trips every year for 25 years. And then it was kind of fun because Molly and Rachel and I calculated, and I think this is our 7th year of girls trips. So we were like, oh, we're getting close to the 25, I guess. And then we kind of had to say, you know what? It's time for us to be done with lunch and stand up and finish this day. So we started to descend into Box Canyon, and this was not, I would say, the most exciting part of the trail. However, because it was fall, there were actually some really good fall colors. Oh, sorry, Stevens Canyon. But there were a lot of really good fall colors that you could see across the way from you. And when you turn and look at Mount Rainier, there were all these fall colors framing it. So that was really fun. You descend to another lake. I don't remember what it was called, but it was a pretty quick descent to that other lake. And someone had said that it was a good lake to eat lunch at, which I would say if you are able to go past Reflection Lakes, it probably would be a beautiful lake to eat lunch at. Because as soon as we left Reflection Lakes, there were like no more people on the trails.
However, the next lake I think is called Louise Lake. I don't think that there's a view of Mount Rainier. I think that it's low, so then it would be blocked out. But it did look like you could hike down to the shore, and it was like a sandy beach. And I think Reflection Lakes, they don't want you to swim in, but you might be able to swim in Louise Lake. So it could be a viable option, and it's all just so beautiful. So really, you just pick whatever you want. And enjoy. But so we continued down Stevens Canyon, and we were just gonna get like a ton of descent. We were gonna drop like 2,000 feet and just have some continuous downhill. So we, continued descending like Carrie had mentioned. The colors were just really beautiful. A lot of the trail was pretty forested. And then I was kind of like just wondering, when are we going to get to the washout? So we were walking along, and then all of a sudden,
which I would say I've been feeling a little bit nervous for the washout, because the signs were like saying, this washout is not maintained, go at your own risk type of a thing. I knew that everyone was doing it because otherwise you had to hitchhike to get around this closed washed out area. But
they just call it, what do they call it, a reroute?
I think they called it, I don't know what they called it. I think they called it a reroute. But so I was feeling a little bit nervous before we came to it that I don't know what it's going to be like. But the ironic thing was, it just was like all of a sudden there was the reroute. It was flagged, which was nice. But also this washout had happened the year before. So thousands of people probably by this point have gone down this path. And it was so easy to find, so easy to follow. I can't imagine for the first few brave people going down that talus slope and making those switchbacks. I mean, that would have been a real... quite an endeavor. And I wonder who first started it. Like, was it a hiker, or did the NPS have some people go out there and do it? Because it's never been maintained. It's never been like super official to my understanding. But the good news was I felt like a highway compared to what I was expecting. And so it did add time though, right? Because the difference between walking down a nicely graded dirt trail and walking down a talus slope where you have to watch your footing and do all these extra switchbacks, and then you go all the way down to the level of the river, and then you have to climb all the way back up to the trail that would have just been a gentle grade downhill. But first you have to like walk alongside the river for kind of longer than I had expected. You kind of have to follow cairns and pay close attention, because there were a couple times where we started following a cairn and then we'd be like, oh, the next one's actually over there. And so again, it was nothing that felt like too dangerous or anything, but it was nice to do in the daylight. And I was really grateful that we were able to be efficient at it, because it did end up being such a long day. I will say the uphill that we had to do was a lot crazier than the downhill. It felt like there was just a lot more mud, and you could see where the washout was, because, in your mind, you're always kind of like, how bad can a washout be? But it was wide enough that you certainly couldn't get around it any other way.
Yeah, if you really wanted to try to walk on the rocks in the washout, you could, but I don't know if I would trust them to be stable. But yeah, when we were
I wouldn't. They did not look stable.
Yeah, I was happy that we went the route that we did. And if we would have continued down the trail, I probably would have backtracked and done the reroute anyways. But the muddy kind of slope that we had to climb up going counterclockwise, I had seen some comments on Far Out that people said it was pretty sketchy to go down, especially if it was wet. And I could definitely see that. So we were grateful we'd had dry weather for several days and it was all fine.
And at the end of the day, it's all doable. It's just what's like a little bit more efficient versus what's something where you're going to have to watch your footing a lot. It's easier to go up, kind of a weird, sketchy uphill in situations like that. So it was more downhill after that. Honestly, I feel like it was at the point where I was starting to get kind of tired of the downhill. We went past this other waterfall that was really very cute, and it had a little log bridge. And then we got to Maple Creek, which was like this beautiful glacially, like white blue color, but it's like you can't really take much time to enjoy it, because you're like, okay, we got to keep going on. And I remember thinking, ugh, I kind of wish we were camping at Maple Creek, but of course we weren't, so we had to keep going on. And as we went on, there was this gal that we met on trail who was like, hey, watch out up ahead. There's something really weird going on with the trail, and you're going to have to cross a road, and you have to walk through a tunnel, and you got to watch out for cars. And we were like, oh my goodness, this is so strange. I haven't heard anything about this. Like, thank you so much for warning us. And as we walked on the trail, we just kept walking like normal, and we went on an animal overpass, which I actually love that so much, because you see all these animal overpasses in Washington in the mountains. If you're not familiar with it, it's like basically they'll fence off both sides of the road so that no wildlife will cross, and then they'll make like this huge bridge type thing that they cover with trees and grass, and it's supposed to be where the wildlife crosses. And so we were like doing the wildlife crossing, which is where the trail goes to go over the road, and I thought that was so awesome rather than having to cross the road.
Which, do you think it's an animal overpass, or do you think it's actually a tunnel, but then they decided to make the trail go on the terrain that the tunnel goes through?
I don't know.
I mean, essentially it's an animal overpass or it's just a tunnel, either way, but it was really cool because all of a sudden we were walking and we were probably 30 feet above the road looking straight down.
Which by the way, it sounds sketchy, but it wasn't. It was like we were in the forest, there was it was plenty wide. But you could see the cars kind of below you.
Yeah, and so it was actually really cool part of the day. And then we continued down, and then we junctioned with another path. And so once again, far out coming in handy here. It had actually mentioned that if you were going counterclockwise, it's easy to stay on the trail. But if you're going clockwise, it's easy to miss the little junction that would take you up over the overpass above the tunnel. And so that's when people maybe get confused and have to go through the tunnel and then find the trail again, as it's not as intuitive to follow if you're going clockwise. But yeah, it was actually kind of a highlight of the day. There was a lot of good stuff that day, but it was kind of cool to just walk above the road.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun. I felt like a little deer or cougar. So the next thing that you see is you get to this little slot canyon, and it was so cool. It was I think it's Box Canyon, and when you look down, it was 115 or 125. It was pretty far. Molly's gonna look it up, but you could see there was this really nicely constructed bridge, super wide. I think it's actually handicap accessible, I'm pretty sure, from the parking lot, because it's all paved all the way there. And, you could kind of stand there and do that thing where you look so far down. And I did take a video with my phone. I'm always nervous that I'm going to drop it all the way down to, 125 feet bottom of a slot canyon. But luckily I didn't. So then we just went to camp. We only had 1.5 miles left. We had a pretty decent, I feel amount of elevation gain left to do. Rachel ended up in front, and she charged uphill. I was I can barely keep up with her. She was an absolute animal. I felt like I was just running uphill behind her, and I was I'm gonna throw up. But I didn't, though. And so we got to this final little creek crossing before camp, and we got our water because we knew we were going to be a little ways from the water for our campsite. And so then I go across the very obvious log bridge. Well, when I get to the other side, there's no, it's just boom, the trail's done. And I was like, what is going on? And when we would go on the log bridges, we would only go one at a time because, every time you're on there, it's bouncing so much, you feel like there's 4 other people hopping on it anyways, so you don't really want to have anyone else on there. I think it would just feel way more bouncy. And so I was like, guys, wait a second, I'm gonna find the trail. And I'm thrashing through the thickets, and I was just this is insane, I don't understand what's going on here. And then luckily Molly looked across the creek and saw that I was in an area where there'd been a slide and there was a different trail established. So of course I have to go back across. Well, first I had to make my way back along the creek through the thicket that I'd gotten myself into, and then back across the bridge, and then walk across the creek. Rock hop, right? Yeah.
I think that Rachel maybe actually is the one that kind of found the way across. But I do remember when we were filling our waters, 2 trail runners were all of a sudden behind us, and they looked like they had just crossed the creek, but we were by the bridge, and I was like, where did these people come from? But so we had a moment of confusion there, and then we rolled into Nickel Creek Camp probably a couple minutes before the sunset. And I think we had the choice of almost any campsite. Only one of them was occupied. So we chose, the campsite that we liked the most.
It had a little bit of a view of the river.
Yeah, a little bit of a sound of the river below. And so we kind of got settled, and we had to be pretty efficient because I think, was it actually starting to sprinkle a tiny bit? Or maybe it started sprinkling a little later, but the sunset was, or the, darkness was coming. So we pitched our tents real quick, and we kind of got camp chores going and food going. And this was one of my favorite evenings on the trail. I feel like we had been kind of like, I don't know, for some reason, every day had felt kind of like rushed and full, and like we were wet and we were cold and we were wanting to get in our tents. But this was just like a pretty nice evening. And so we had our supper, and then we just like sat and just had great conversation and laughed. And yeah, it was just a really pleasant evening.
It was one of those camps where you were really far away from the toilet and the bear hang. Luckily, no uphill or downhill, but just kind of far away. So then, of course, you do like a group trip to the bear hang, group trip to the toilet. It's just like you're going everywhere together, and
just like how we're going all the way around Mount Rainier together.
Yeah.
And also to the bathroom.
Yeah. And so that was just a really fun evening. And I actually thought that was a cute camp. And did we see mice running around? Yeah, we did. I wonder what will happen. I don't know.
Oh my God.
But anyway, it was a good day on trail. I saw some really cool fungus, which somebody identified later for me as lion's mane. So that was kind of cool.
Really?
Yeah. I put it on Instagram, and someone was like, look at that lion's mane. And I was like, this is lion's mane, like writing it down.
Amazing.
But yeah, so that was a great day on the Wonderland Trail, and I wonder what'll happen next. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram if you want to see any pictures or videos about what we talked about today. As always, please feel free to leave a rating or review for our podcast, or share it with a friend if you think they'd like it. All right, guys. Bye.